I would like to open up the discussion a bit and invite the other speakers to the stage. I think we can just do it standing around the tables if you are fine with it. And I would like to come up with a couple of questions. Yeah, maybe we can turn off the beamer. That kind of continue a bit with the past two questions. So one is to the role of art. What could be the role of arts and of cultural producers in a struggle for an society, for a much needed social transformation towards a more ecological and democratic way of living? How can this much needed transformation get started at all? And as I tried to link the presenters at the beginning of this symposium through what I assumed an anti-extractivist approach, what would it mean to live non-extractively? So maybe we can just that each of you refers to an aspect of these questions you may be interested in, or to any other things that yeah, popped up during this evening. Could you start?
Just maybe to plug in into your presentation, I liked it a lot, really. Thank you very much. I think it was amazing. What would it mean to live in a non-extractive way? Because this is something what I would like to think about. And the problem also, I mean, it's not only the problem of an image, and the problem of course, is an ethical one for the institutions, because it is extremely important, I think, to raise this question, even without the possibility to give a clear technical answer. Because after all, art is supposed to generate, to some extent, the impossible, and also the problem with the oil companies, because we don't know this history well enough. And at a certain stage, because, for example, electric cars were invented a long time ago, like in the 60s. But oil companies lobbied against. Explicitly, they didn't want an electric engine because they wanted their own, they wanted to sell oil. So there are things like that which have been present throughout history. So, and it is also important to talk about it, it is important to know it. And there's something else I wanted to point out in this context. There was a detail. Yeah, yes, precisely. How can we imagine a non-extractional future? I mean, it is a big question. I'm sorry. I mean, I'm just like starting generating something. But I mean, please contribute.
Well, I think, I mean, Liberate is a wonderful example, and I told you today I'm. In quite a few lectures I have referred to that. What is probably, and now coming to your question, Oliver, I mean, like what can art do in a way? I think there's quite a few very, very good examples over the last years which prove already that art and activism, and therefore kind of using certain performative ways of implementing a subject, which is maybe whatever you want to refer to, whether it's media, you know, we know this is, we're living in the post-fact era and so on and so forth. And this kind of performative direct encounters and actions, you know, where people have the possibility to, in a certain kind of immediate way of acting and reacting and sharing is something which we have to deal with, because we know we cannot otherwise get further. And I'm doing some research exactly on that, you know, this kind of you know, just give a possibility, an option of having this moment, let's say, a moment which is very important in order to experience something. And I think this is where art at the moment is, in a way, or also experimenting, negotiating, and therefore, yeah, I think that's what art can contribute. Everything else is very confusing, very complex. We don't know exactly how we can relate, and especially when it comes to you were mentioning today, greenwashing and all this, you know, this kind of personal responsibilities, which basically I read even today, I think, an article of Malta saying, okay, we have a problem of climate change, so, you know, don't brush your teeth with electric brush and stuff like this. This is all nice, you know, it's sweet almost, but I mean, we know we have to deal with much bigger issues, and like, yeah, Liberate does, or kind of what Oliver does with documentary, to create a counter, alternative way of doing things. That's what art can do, I guess. I mean, I could say a bit more, but
I also want to say thank you to all. You were really interesting presentations, and I also want to make a point, because I feel like I'm kind of coming from another position, or like also stressing the point of like the poetics, or a non-linear way, or way of storytelling, and also like this combination of politically, like I really like this division, or like this tension fields between very active political standpoints and very active political ways of also producing questions that are put into public. But I also find it really interesting to that works that work on a kind of poetic level to open up those questions, and also to find maybe pockets that are not within the institutions, but maybe also leave the institutions to create fields of like, yeah, other fields of meeting, let's say. Yes.
Well, I guess Liberate was just an experiment, a laboratory to look at the idea of whether change is possible and whether art can be part of making that change. And it was just a modest sort of contribution to that. It's not saying that everybody should, you know, adopt those kind of practices, or be involved in that way, or that's, you know, the register of response. It's just to say that every industry, every domain of human activity needs to change. And the failure to respond to climate change is a political failure. It's a social failure. But it's also a cultural failure. It's a failure of human empathy and connection. And, you know, art and meaning making are part of the landscape in which the solution lies, not just, for example, a technical solution to replace fossil fuels, but a way that we relate to each other. You know, my colleagues are helping the refugees flee a climate-driven conflict in Syria. They're part of helping people feed themselves in South Sudan for a conflict that is also oil-fueled. There are 4 big famines about to be declared. A famine shouldn't exist, and climate change is a big part of that. The funds to make the poorest of the world resilient to those changes, or to stay on their land, is not there. And so this is a massive cultural failure. So I think it just becomes us to look at cultural parts of the solution to the climate and wider crisis.
Maybe on the closing kind kind of finalizing note, because it is a very important discussion. Institutions, what can they do? How far can they go? So we have to work with institutions. But I really deeply believe that institutions have to be under pressure of the audiences, of the public, of the artists. This is vital for us, for the art world, because they need to understand where we want them to go, even though they cannot maybe implement it immediately. But something what you do is absolutely necessary, and it is vital. And there's a big necessity of more projects like that, because they need to feel this idealist pressure of the art. They are there for art. There would be no institutions without artists, no curators without artists. And art, of course, is not about selling oil.
Does anyone from the audience want to intervene or involve?
In my opinion, it's important to reflect also the what Liberate Date did to reflect also the art network. Yeah, I think it's necessary to cross borders for artists to act in other fields, not just in the art field. And yeah, I would like to ask, what is your opinion, or how do you see, what kind of ways are existing to do this?
Or maybe we could collect 2 or 3 questions, and then each on the panel decides to what to respond, where he or she. Yeah. Are there more?
We can also do it in more informal, casual way. Maybe.
You want to wrap it up already?
No,
yeah.
no, but no, it was just
maybe a few more minutes, right? Are there any further questions we could add to what Ernst says? No? Okay, so then, sorry.
So, but if I understand you correctly, you want to ask, like, what kind of other possibilities of cross-border?
To cross borders, what Liberate Date did, they tried to also to Glen, when you explained that you took part in this workshop, so also to do something which is not, you know, the grammar of art, to get out of this kind of system, because in my opinion it's you have to get out of the system to approach the media. I think the art world is quite small, and I think there are not a lot of effects. So it has to be extended in other fields.
But I think this is exactly what happened over the last years, you know. I mean, like, seeing institutional critique not any longer something which is really a pure arts institution, but kind of questioning the government as an institution and or democracy and things like that. I mean, I have quite a few examples, no? I mean, like the whole social movements, like from Occupy Wall Street. I mean, they all had practices which do kind of come from let's say, putting energies together from art field, from whatever. I mean, all kind of cultural ways of expressing. So for me, I mean, art has reached that part already, but of course it should go much further.
I think that the example of Liberate Tate is also a good example that sometimes it's an advantage not to cross the borders, because I think this was a very smart strategic decision, as far as I understood it, to define these strategies as art strategies and to define this kind of activism within the art world, because otherwise it would have been much more easier for the Tate Gallery to smash it and to destroy it. But as it was labeled as art, the Tate had a much tougher life, because it's really bad in the public to publicly imprison or arrest artists, or call the police to arrest them. So, I mean, in general, I'm with you, but I understand that there are also situations where it really makes sense not to cross the borders.
I'm talking about the context of art. I don't speak about but you misunderstood. I'm talking about to use artistic strategies and implement this in other contexts, like to use other venues, the public space, and so on.
If I could just, one of the challenges about where Liberate Tate goes next is that it is a big leap for us to move into other institutions, because our whole mode was within the gallery, within the barrier of that. But certainly a lot of activists were very keen to be part of making the kind of performances that we did. And we do find that there's now, you know, in the activist world, you know, we've got amazing creativity happening, but also some very tired things that don't work anymore. You know, A to B marches, you know, the language of protest, it's just not working. And even, you know, the limits of Occupy, and these things are known. So there is, for me, still a great need for this cross-fertilization. And one of the liberations of Liberate Tate for me is I didn't have to worry about my NGO brand. I didn't have to worry about, you know, something going wrong, somebody being arrested. You know, we worried about the art not being damaged. We wanted to make sure everybody was safe. Unfortunately, Tate security guards decided to jump in front of a turbine blade. But one of the things we are looking at now is that what other institutions could creative interventions help advance that institution into a more progressive space. So I think it's a really good challenge, but also the role of artists in society. So a lot more artists. I'm being asked by lots of different organisations, can you come and, you know, do a session with us about X, Y, and Z? And so there is a lot of interest in your practice and your process in terms of, you know, where we ended up in those things. So, but it's a great question. And, you know, our starting point was, you know, Joseph Beuys, we're all artists. It's for all of us to step forward and make the art that we individually and collectively need. So it's about encouraging everybody to step forward. That was what we were trying to do as well. You know, go forth and make your art for your world and make your future world happen through your art making and your other activity in life. For those who value art. And for those who value their art world, make sure the art world and institutions that you love are not part of the problem, but become part of the solution.
Just a quick question, which is maybe referring in the other way around. So, what if an institution would come to you and commission you to do something? Because that happened, you know, I mean, at some point with institutional critique, no? I mean, hey, come on, you know, I invite you to this festival, you know, we have these problems, and make something, please.
Well, when you pretend to be ethical, you can't just pretend. So our kind of rules include, we only commission ourselves. So there is, you know, we do take speaker fees, that pays for materials. The freedom we have is that we're not making a living we're not trying to make our living by our artistic practice, and that, of course, is very kind of helpful. But we set up those limits. So we will do events like this. We will do performance lectures, and we accept speaker fees. But we only commission ourselves.
But I think there's a point, no?
So you set your boundaries.
Yeah. Okay.
So, yeah, should we? I think we wrap it up here. So thanks a lot to our 4 speakers. Thanks a lot for your participation in this event. And I think we can continue talking informally. And yeah, thanks.